Good evening. I'd like to call our meeting to order this evening here for Monday, September 22nd, 2014. And if I could ask everybody to join us all in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. And before I do that, sorry, if you have a cell phone, please turn it off. And that way it doesn't disrupt the video. You all can smile. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Adams, roll call, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Pilkins? Here. Champlin?
Here.
Van Lente? Schmidt? Peterson? Schichtel?
Here.
Gregg?
Here.
Finn?
Here.
Hudson?
Here.
And we do have a quorum.
Thank you, sir. If everyone's had a chance to skim the agenda for, again, this evening, September 22nd, 2014. Looking for an approval of tonight's agenda.
I move we approve the agenda.
I'll second. Joe and Kevin, respectively.
Motion by Schichtel, supported by Finn, to approve tonight's agenda. Roll call. Gregg?
Yes.
Schichtel?
Yes.
Champlin?
Yes.
Finn?
Yes.
Pilkins?
Yes.
Hudson?
Yes.
Van Lente and
At this stage, we open the speaking here to any public comments pertaining to anything not on our agenda. And we have people. Thank you. Welcome. Well, we don't always get people.
And I believe they're regarding the...
I figured that.
Yeah.
Hey, in case you want to talk about the weather, pumpkin. All right. Board. Then next I'm looking for an approval of the July 28, 2014 meeting minutes. I'm figuring that on the members absent, that Mr. Champlin was not absent because his name was down the line of making motions.
No, obviously.
I know, but it says you weren't.
That's your answer.
Well, correct. No, you weren't because,
July.
well, of July. Oh, you may have been in, but, yeah, because it shows, because I was sick and ill and you weren't here. And you would have run this because I was down and I apologize.
I apologize too, because I wasn't not in.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
found a word that possibly meant to be something else on page 5,
Yes, sir.
second paragraph down. Reads, it is anticipated the new sign will exhibit less than the proposed sign. I think that maybe
less light.
should be present sign. Page 5, second paragraph, bottom line.
It says will exhibit less light than the proposed sign. So they were comparing lighting issues. I don't know how you were reading that one, Mr. Adams. On the last line of that.
She stated it is anticipated the new sign will exhibit less light than the proposed sign.
Yes. That's where he's got some height.
New sign and
That probably should
proposed
not
sign.
be proposed. The word proposed, existing sign.
That's what he's got circled, so yes, sir.
That's correct.
Okay.
We'll change that.
I didn't pick on that word, Joe, but good stuff.
You didn't see that?
Well, I did, but I let it go. Okay. So now I'd entertain a motion based on the two corrections, unless somebody else found something else.
Make a motion?
Yes, please.
Actually.
Please. Nobody first it.
I'll first it.
First it. Mr. Champlin, followed by Mr. Gracky.
Okay, motion by Champlin, supported by Gregg, to approve the meeting minutes for 7/28/14, subject to the two corrections, one being Randy's name should be put under members present, and then on page 5, the last sentence will correct proposed 3D system. Fent,
Yes.
Wilkins, Champlin,
Yes.
Schuchel,
Yes.
Gregg,
Yes.
Buckles.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
And this evening, we have a public hearing. Public hearing here, we are to consider a request from Pam Park and Robert Jones, address of 2223 10th Avenue, Cadillac, Michigan, 49601, for rezoning of 1409 Wright Street from I-1 Light Industrial / R-2 One Family Residential to change it to R2 One Family Residential throughout. Everyone, this is support document 4A that's in our packets, as well as everyone had an additional packet with, in front of them. Also this evening, having read that, Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The reason you have the thick packet in front of you is we cannot get the monitors to work. For some reason, they were working earlier, but they're not working. So basically, I'm going to go through the presentation. You have the packet in front of you. Unfortunately, the pages aren't numbered, but I think shouldn't be an issue. So, and I'll try to go as quickly as possible. And if you ladies want to follow along, here is a copy of the packet I'm going to be using. And again, I'll try to go through these quickly. The cover page, again, as the chairman has indicated, this is a rezoning application. The common address is 1409 Wright Street, Cadillac, Michigan, and the applicants have requested that the parcel will be rezoned from light industrial I-1 to one family residential R2. If you go to the second page of the handout, it gives the names of the applicant, which I won't need to repeat. Mr. Chairman has done it. There is the applicant's rep is here tonight as well, Ms. Joni Holly from Coldwell Banker Schmidt Realtor. And I'm not sure if they both want to talk a little later, but they are here for purposes of tonight's hearing. The next page is an aerial. Again, probably you have a somewhat colored version of it as well. It's not in the packet, but you can see the dashed black line kind of in the center. Hopefully you can see it. It would have been nice on the display, but the northern edge of the property abuts Wright Street, and then on the west, the long piece of the property abuts Leeson Avenue, and then you'll see too that a part of the property is bisected by Arthur Street, so it really has frontage on 3 streets. That's the location, and we'll get into that again in just a second. The next page is the rezone request. The first bullet, the site has 2 classifications as mentioned. Most of the property to the north of Arthur is zoned I-1 industrial. The southern portion is zoned R2, and the request tonight is they would like to have the entire parcel rezoned as R2, one family residential. You'll note too that on the aerial that the longer portion north of Arthur, that's where there is an existing house that's located there. That home, again, is right now it's zoned I-1 industrial. Go to the next page, should be a graphic just kind of showing you the surrounding zone district classifications. To the north of Wright Street, you'll see the baseball fields there. That's the old Casa Fields. That's zoned public service. It's owned by the city. To the west is R2, it's single family residential. To the south, it's a combination of R2 and RM1, multifamily. To the south, you have Mayberry Apartments and the Cornerstone Apartments. And into the immediate east, you have I-1. To the immediate east of this property is basically a storage yard that's owned by Michigan Bell. And then to the east of that, you have a Michigan Bell facility. A little bit of background on the next sheet. It's kind of an elongated parcel. It has more than 99 feet of frontage because the right-of-way of Leeson is included in their description. But if you discount that, the parcel itself, the buildable portion, has about 99 feet of width and then 620 feet long from north to south. As mentioned earlier, it has frontage on Wright, Leeson, and Arthur. And the parcel is separated by Arthur Street on the south, the smaller ones, approximately 99 by 165. as I mentioned earlier, the dwelling and associated residential accessory buildings, they're located on the northern segment. According to the information I was able to obtain, the home was constructed in 1962. It has been for sale, it's been on the market. I did talk with Ms. Holly a little bit. I also looked at on the internet, and there's a site called Zillow, so I used that just as a gauge. And so this could be less than really than it has been on the market, but it's been on the market for at least 800 days, so it's approaching the 3-year mark. So it's been on the market for a long time. And according to the listing information and so forth, according to the equalization records, the listing price is not overvalued. So it's not as though the reason it's been on the market so long is because they're asking 4 times as much as it's worth. That's not the case. The value that's being, or the price that's being asked appears appropriate. The use of the property, because it's industrially zoned and there's a home on it, the zoning ordinance classifies that home as a major non-conforming use, the most severe. And the reason that's important is if that home were to be destroyed under this zoning classification, it couldn't be reconstructed. Okay, the ordinance doesn't allow its reconstruction. And that has some issues with financing. If you wanted to buy that home, for example, let's say you went to a lending institution, the bank, and like a mortgage, one of the things they're going to ask, they're going to ask us, is, okay, if that home was to burn or to be majorly destroyed, let's say, could it be rebuilt? We want to make sure that our loan is being somehow guaranteed. We would have to say no. If the home burned, couldn't be rebuilt. A lot of lending institutions we find will not lend in situations like it, or if they do lend, basically they'll just lend a very small portion of what it is you're asking. So that can be a real issue. And again, my understanding that has been an issue with the sale of this particular property, but I'll let Ms. Holly get into that. The next page, surrounding land uses. We kind of already mentioned this, but to the north, once again, for the record, basically there's the old Casa baseball fields, which we're hoping we can rejuvenate somewhat. To the east is the Michigan Bell Telephone Company storage yard. It's been that way for many years. Excuse me, to the south, it's Mayberry Apartments and Leeson Court Apartments, so I should say Cornerstone Apartments. Leeson Road running through it. Both those facilities have been there for a number of years. And to the west, there is single-family residential, and a fair amount of residential, more or less medium density in orientation. We look at the development trends within the immediate area. Really, there hasn't been significant change over the past few years, at least. Probably the most significant has been to the west. Some of the housing has developed in, let's say, in more recent decades, but really not a lot in particular going on around that area, home here, home there. The next page, again, it's just another aerial, I won't use it. Go to the next one, it says adjacent zoning. In terms of how is property zoned around them, again, they're looking for a full R2 one-family classification. If you go to the north, where the Casa Fields are, it's zoned POS, public open space. And if you go to the east, with the Bell property, the storage yard, that's light industrial. To the south, it's a combination of R2, one-family residential, consistent with that being sought, and RM1, multiple family, the 2-apartment or multi-family complexes. And again, fairly consistent with the R2. And then the zoning to the immediate west is all R2. So again, consistent with what's being requested. The next page is just that zoning map again. We'll go to the next page. It talks about rezoning considerations. What are some of the things we looked at as we lead up to discussing, should this property be rezoned or not? We looked at a variety of things. One was the historic use of the site. And historically, the site's been used for residential. It's been zoned industrial for a number of years, but obviously it's residential. I shouldn't say obviously, but its residential use has been as such, and at least since 1962, and it does not appear as though there's been any sort of demand or need by surrounding industrial development to the east to try to acquire the property. We looked at zoning on the various sides. On 3 sides, the zoning is very consistent with the request. On the west, or on the east side, obviously, the industrial side, that would not be considered consistent. The site has been for sale for a lengthy period at a reasonable price, and there's been no, to our knowledge, no known industrial interest in the property. As I mentioned, the south portion of the site, this site is already zoned residential. It's fairly unusual in this city to have a piece of property with multiple zoning classifications. It happens, and I'm assuming the reason it happened here was because part of the site is cut by a street, Arthur Street, so kind of made logical sense, I suppose. It is an elongated, it has an elongated, narrow shape, and it would not be conducive to many forms of industrial development. I looked at the site to see, okay, based on setbacks and so forth, could it be developed for industrial purposes? It could, but the range of industrial uses probably would be very minimal due to such factors as the site could not accommodate a real large range of larger building sizes and shapes, somewhat difficult for truck circulation due to the narrowness of the site in order to turn. Basically, it would be a tough site. In terms of industrial, again, it could accommodate a smaller operation, or it could be absorbed by an abutting operation if that was of interest. But it's not a real good site, plus the location on 3 streets. It may sound good, but it's not necessarily conducive. And the surroundings, land uses are not real conducive to industrial. The next page, again, some more rezoning considerations. So why is it zoned I-1? Well, I wasn't around here when it became I-1, but I believe probably what happened is it basically ended the block of I-1 zoning. It kind of completed the block. It made some sense, okay, to zone it industrial, because here you've got a block, let's say, that's 90% industrial, or at least it's industrially zoned, not industrially used. And the thought was, you know, should we really classify this skinny, this narrow piece of property, other than industrial? So it made some sense, and I'm going to assume, which I know you should assume nothing, but when this happened, for whatever reasons, the property owners didn't object. Okay, but that's a long time ago. So, and they may have. Okay, okay, but it's a long time ago. Okay, and you'll like to run little weeds. So, I think. I hope. And probably the biggest drawback would be for the abutting use to the east. If this were rezoned to residential, the abutting parcel to the east would be somewhat restricted, or more restricted in the size of building that it could build. Right now, if a building were to be constructed next door in that storage lot, they could build a building within 25 feet of the site lot line that we're talking about tonight. If this parcel was rezoned to residential, they have to be set back 50 feet. Okay, so they would lose about 25 feet of setback next door. We did give the abutting property owners the opportunity to comment. They know about the hearing and so forth, and there were no comments were received. So it's not as though they weren't notified of this request tonight. Next, we looked at the fact that the residential development that exists, the nearby industrial uses they have, basically, more or less peacefully from a land use standpoint, coexisted over the years. And one of the benefits about rezoning this property is that it actually would act as a buffer for the residential development that's particularly to the west, as opposed to having the industrial come right up to the street and across the street. We've got newer residential, so that's a plus for the rezoning. Next page talks about public notification. We notified all the property owners and residents within 300 feet of the site of the rezoning. We put a notice of the application of the hearing also in Cadillac News. We also put a copy of the notice and application on file right here at the city offices in case somebody wanted to come in and see the full packet. And so essentially everybody was notified. Those notices were given not less than 15 days prior to the hearing. That's a state requirement. And we have not received any communications, either in writing or verbally from anyone. Next page talks about rezoning considerations, and these are from the ordinance. And when the Planning Commission looks at rezoning, and yours is a recommendation, by the way, to City Council, there are four basic factors, and I won't spend the time reading these right now because we're going to look at them as we go through the next 4 or 5 pages. But these are the considerations that we'll be looking at. The next page, compatibility with surrounding land uses and zone districts. Basically, the first standard that you use is, what about compatibility? If we rezone this, will the zoning be compatible with the land uses and the surrounding zoning? And not only do we look at the single-family dwelling, but we look at the range of R2 uses, which I've listed here. What we believe, what staff believes, and I'll take these on a kind of a northeast, southwest fashion, we believe that the R2 classification is compatible with the uses to the north. That's the Casa Athletic Fields, and the zoning, which is PLS. We do not see an issue there. We believe that it's compatible with the zoning to the south, which is a combination of R2, which is what's being requested, and RM1. Those are residential uses. The two larger facilities, Cornerstone and the other complex, no indication they're going to go away, so they're going to be there for a long time. So we believe that the uses to the south are compatible. To the west, that also is zoned R2 and is developed residentially, fully compatible with the request tonight. The only issue with compatibility would be the island zoning to the east. However, we didn't know it again. The dwelling's been in existence for 50+ years, and over that time, it appears that the residential use of the property and the nearby industrial development, again from a land use standpoint, appear to have coexisted without significant negative impacts. So our findings on that one. Second one, is the rezoning consistent with the city master plan? And if it isn't, does the request represent an appropriate use of the land based on changes and or other factors that have occurred subsequent to adoption of the plan? Well, the plan is consistent with the zoning. It shows it as industrial. The surrounding properties, the plan shows is also consistent with the zoning of the surrounding properties. Pretty much the plan in this location basically took the zoning and went with that. Again, however, we believe, staff believes, that the residential use of the site has been there for 50 years. There's been no interest or intent, our understanding, based on what we can find, for an industrial entrepreneur to want to use this property for industrial purposes. And the fact that you have surrounding residential development, the fact that this has been residentially used for an extensive period of time, the fact that there's no pressure to develop it industrially, and the fact that, quite frankly, there are many more sites in the city zoned industrial that would be less expensive to develop than this particular site, okay? Because not only would you have to acquire the site, perhaps demo the house and so forth, and essentially you'd have to modify the landscape, put it back into shape. Those costs would far outweigh, for example, the cost to go buy a couple of acres, take in the Poplar Industrial Park that's fully served with utilities. You can get 2 acres, $28,000, and you'd be on your way to building. Here, you've got to buy the property with the house, demo the house, and so forth. So it really does detract. And in this particular area, again, to our knowledge, our records don't show any really significant indication of a demand for additional industrial development at this location. The next standard, public facilities and services. The site is fully serviced by municipal infrastructure. It's really not an issue. The existing public facilities, water, sewer, and the like, they are sufficient to accommodate the R2 uses as they are the I1. The next one, is the R2 district appropriate? Staff believes it is. We believe that based on the site's character, the existing use, the location, the anticipated long-term use, the viable development potential that we've talked about, the character of surrounding development, it really doesn't appear to us that the rezoning will have a significant impact on the surrounding zone district classifications, including the industrial. The rezoning will recognize the primary use of the site and provide the home with the protection needed for rebuilding should it be destroyed, which does not exist right now. The next page. The fact that the home has been on the market for an extended period of time, as I mentioned, at a sale price that is well within true cash value, indicates that its attraction for use is permitted by the Iowa industry. Obviously, it's been limited. There's been really no demand, or has been a demand, again, I can let these folks talk to this, for the use of the property for residential purposes. And as I mentioned earlier, it's noted that the classification is fully consistent with the zoning to the north, south, and west of the site. Tonight, your action, you're being called upon to recommend to the Cadillac City Council approval or denial of the application. And when you do that, it's got to be supported by findings of fact. Basically, you look at the record that we've talked about tonight, you look at the staff report, review of any public comments that will be made tonight, or that you may have received, and any other factual information that's applicable to the application. For the benefit of the public too, I just want to let them know that the Planning Commission did receive a packet, and essentially this information, not in this form, was in their packet, so it's not as though they haven't had a chance to digest this. So I think sometimes public thinks you've heard this for the first time. They've had an opportunity, and they do a great job of, as you can see by the minutes, of scrutinizing everything. So with that, again, Mr. Chair, and I'd be happy to answer any questions an hour later, but I would recommend or suggest that you open up the public speaking portion of the hearing, let these folks talk if they wish to, and then I can be happy to answer any questions. Tell them to feel free, they can correct anything any mistake I made or add to or whatever.
Okay. At this time, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. So if either of you ladies have anything to say, then just please come forward to that podium, just state your name and where you live, and we're all ears.
I'm Joni Holly. I live at 461 East Half Street in Cadillac. I am the realtor for this property at 1409 Wright Street. I have had it listed for quite some time, and when we first listed the property, I knew that there were two zonings on it. However, with one of them being R2, I didn't think that it would be an issue, and I wish we would have had a little bit better visual because I have a really good map of it. But we did get an offer on it, and it failed due to financing. And so then I talked to different lenders, and they cannot finance this because with the industrial zoning on there, they would have to do a commercial loan. And they can't do a commercial loan on the residence, and they can't do a residential loan on the industrial zoning. So that's where it's been, at the point that we have to do something different. We did take into consideration that it does have the industrial zoning on it, and so it's been offered in that way too, but it is long and narrow and hasn't had that kind of interest. Pam's parents resided there for a number of years, and her father grew a very large garden there, and the attraction really is the home. It has been modified with a ramp, which is very appealing because we do not have very much of that available at this time. And with the gardening or the piece of land for residential use in the city, a lot of people that's attracted to. With the offer that we had, it was appraised higher than what we have it priced at, and so we would like the zoning changed so that we could sell it. Pam's parents have passed away, and so then it's become more of a hardship for the family to continue paying the taxes and these kind of things on the property, and their desire is to sell it.
Is anyone living there now?
No.
Any questions on this? Thank you. Any comments? You think she's good? You don't have to, right?
Well, I'm Pamela Park, and I grew up in that home, and it always has been a home. And they changed it for some reason. I remember years ago my father being mad about it, and so I sure appreciate it if we could get it to a point where we can sell it, because it does drain the family to maintain a home, and I'd like to see someone live there again. Leave their house on this.
I remembered the garden when she...
She's
a solid picture. Great garden, always a great garden. Thank you. Okay, since we're still open to public hearing, is there anyone here to speak opposing the zoning change? So being no one on that, we will close the public hearing. The board can review the comments here amongst ourselves. This is somewhat similar to the one down...
It is very similar to the one
By the market.
up by Granite and there's a side street now, but near Northwest Bank. Yeah, I know the line has to be drawn somewhere, so to speak,
Right.
and that doesn't mean it can't be a bit corrected, and I really don't see it at this point in time, at least, as an issue. Doesn't mean that somebody can purchase it in the future and come back to you and
Sure.
try to get it back into industrial, but I think one of the things about this property is its long-term residential use has some bearing on it. And in fact, the home appears to be in good shape, the site's well maintained, and it's surrounded by residential development.
And with your comment that it acts as a buffer for the R2 across the way, that's not a bad thing either. So.
It's the issues. It's appropriate to change it to R2. Would you like to make a motion to that? I'll make a motion to change it to R2 with the staff's recommendations.
I'll second that.
Mr. Sheffield, second?
Okay.
Again.
Okay, the motion by Champlin, supported by Shiflin, to rezone the property from its current I-1 to R2, and based on the staff report and the findings as presented tonight.
That's right.
Okay, yep, take a roll call vote. Schichtel?
Yes.
Dent?
Yes.
Wilkins?
Yes.
Champlin?
Yes.
Gregg?
Yes.
Putnam?
Yes.
Okay. This will now go to the City Council, and City Council, it will probably go to the City Council at the next meeting. However, this is a point of information. They will also have a public hearing, and so obviously you're welcome to that meeting, but it'll just be for the setting of a public hearing. It's the actual public hearing that you really need to be at, and we'll make sure, obviously, you let you know when that's going to be. We'll get it on the schedule as quickly as possible. No delay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Now you're welcome to hang out while we keep going, or you're welcome to leave whenever you
We appreciate it.
Okay.
I think we're gonna step out.
You don't have too many to
Thank
hang
you
out
so
with
much.
much
You
longer.
will see yourself on television.
That's scary. Yeah.
Nobody should have.
Nobody has ever seen.
Okay. And that's all we have tonight, sir.
New business none, old business none, tabled items none, board member comments. Anybody?
Glad to see you guys again this evening.
Likewise. Yeah, for the audience, we were not here in August, so there was not a meeting, sorry. And any public comments, Elvis left, and having said that, nobody objected. We're out of here.